That morning, as I gazed out the window, I could feel my heart racing, thrumming with a mix of excitement and nervous energy. It was that unique sensation, a blend of anticipation and fear, that you only truly understand when you've experienced it yourself. I was weighed down by thoughts of what others might think, afraid of what I could lose, unsure what the future had in store. Those were the things that consumed me because at the time, they were all I knew how to focus on. I had programmed myself to worry, and when worry becomes your default, it's almost impossible not to see life through a lens of scarcity. You become fixated on holding on to what little you have, playing defense instead of reaching out to seize what's waiting for you. You guard against the world instead of welcoming it in to reshape your story. That morning, cold, wet, and gray, I felt numb on the surface. Yet deep within me, I was completely unaware of the power I was about to unlock, to bring the world in so that it may be. Reshape that morning, cold, wet gray. I was numb, but deep down completely oblivious. To me, there was a little fire, burning too small to recognize a spark of courage in it. Infancy see at that moment, if someone asked me, can you even be scared and courageous at the same time, I would have said those two words do not go together. Right, we're talking night and day, fire and water, black and white, but time's job is to reveal, and it has shown that there is no courage without fear. There is no fire, no matter how bright or powerful, that doesn't buy. Default bring about those mysterious shapes dancing in the shadows. If you want fire, great, but you must learn to dance with what hides in the periphery. You must learn to go where your impulse begs you not to, and so that morning I went to dance with my demons. What if the one thing holding you back in your life was you? And look, I know the world is a complex, multivariable, unfair sometimes, even cryptic place. I've never said anything to the contrary, but what humans do so well, sometimes for good and sometimes to our detriment, is see life through stories. Ideas, whether you know it or not, you are playing by a set of rules right now as you take this, and you have defined a set of parameters and deemed them acceptable, decided they are what you deserve. You've allowed for yourself a certain level of growth, a certain amount of happiness, a certain amount of time to do what you love, a certain expectation around the role of work in your life, a certain window of income you've identified as reasonable. Overall, a certain feeling you get when you look in the mirror, and my objective is not to tell you that any of the above is good or bad. It's to remind you that they are all stories. Our current state is not etched in stone. It's clumsily drawn on a dry erase board, clumsily, because how could we know everything right? We learn along the way in a dry erase board, because there's never a moment in time in which you cannot begin. Again, think about that. Never good, bad, or in between. There is never a situation from which you can emerge as something different, from which you can't choose to take a different path, change the narrative around you, your relationships, your job, your goals. But like the elephant tied to the chair with the rope, one must learn that it is not the chair holding them back, but their perception, their understanding of a supposed role in life. So as I drove away that morning, I wasn't leaving a physical place, but a mental constraint, turning my back on a manufactured idea about who I was and what life would allow, not in a snap, no, not all at once, but an adventure that would begin pulling back the curtains one by one on all that I'd walked right by. See, the first step to getting more is understanding you've been accepting less. That is where new roads for present themselves, and it is that new road that I want for you, that understanding that so much will be given to those with the courage to ask. So as you stand now, examine what you've been asking of life. My hunch is that perhaps it's not enough, perhaps there's more, perhaps a new chapter is waiting to begin, and right now is when that first page gets turned. Joseph Campbell says that the cave you fear holds the treasure you seek. Why? Because to face the dancing shadows is to gain power over them. It shows our mind that reality is far less scary than our perception of reality. That no chain or lock or wall all can be more debilitating than the mental constraints we create by ourselves in our heads. It shows that the man guarding the door can just as easily be the one who unlocks it. And so what better a time than now to turn that key to step out and confront what was once nothing, more than a vast emptiness. Jump into the cold water of opportunity that shocks us, at first creates pins and needles and discomfort, but ultimately provides a chance to acclimate to and navigate a foreign world. You just need to jump, and not a mountain, but a foot enough to start earning that confidence, creating that self-trust, believing in yourself. So drive a way to the understanding that there's always another level if you want it, to the belief that nothing is outside the realm of possibility. Those boundaries can be redrawn to the idea that no one tells you who you are or what you're capable of. The world doesn't give orders, it reacts to who you to decide to be, to the awareness that possible victories always outweigh in magnitude the possible defeat, to the realization that who you were yesterday is in no way related to who you can be tomorrow. All chapters end, and you decide when that happens. Everything else belongs in the rear view. Success is knowing this, it's believing it, holding on when others would let go, be reassured by the incremental nature of what's ahead. Zero miracles, just the courage to begin, just push the ball down the hill, give life a chance to help you create momentum. No more thinking, worrying, procrastinating, just go. It's incredible how fast things change when we grant ourselves that freedom, when we see all of the world is open to us. But will you open your mind to that opportunity? I've said this before, and I'll say it again, nothing is sure in life, but you are guaranteed to lose if you don't go. It's to let falsehoods and debilitating stories guide your way. So stop letting these narratives tell you who you are and create reality with you, your feet. Why? Because you can, because you were meant for more, and because more starts now. Stop protecting what you've built, like what you've built is what holds the value. Know the value is in the builder, his or her knowledge and ability to build again and again if they so desire. On an episode last week, I talked about a conversation recently had at a mastermind in Santa Monica. I want to pass along one more piece of wisdom from that day that I found to be incredibly valuable. This was just a random comment made by someone in the group. And so to kick off the scenario, someone asked everyone in the room, hey, but what if things don't work out right? And it was more specific. I forget exactly what it was, something along the lines of, what if the monthly revenue decreases? Or you know what? If you know my target or my intended outcome doesn't evolve or unfold the way I wanted it to, what then is it worth taking the risk? And this person stands up and says, listen, we need to stop looking at our businesses like it is the only business, like it is something that needs to be protected, that if it falls down or if it's taken away, it's over, it's the end of us. We are entrepreneurs, which means the power and strength is in our ability to build again, not the thing that's built. Right? Theoretically, we should be able to do this over and over and over again. And what we do, and obviously I'm paraphrasing all of this, right? But what we do is we put cages around ourselves and our potential. We shackle ourselves to the current moment instead of taking the necessary risks because we're thinking, what if we lose it all? Well, fine, it's the ability to build again. And I love the idea because, man, it's relatable to me, right? I have 3 businesses I'm growing right now, and every single one of them, I find myself playing conservative at times, not wanting to break the momentum or what's going right. I've spent a decade building this, and the most valuable thing I've acquired or produced is not the company, it's the ability to add value, right? That's what's been built. And even if the physical company disappeared overnight, no one can take what's been learned. I think it was in the book The Happiness Hypothesis, which was one of the first books I read almost a decade ago, prior to starting my personal brand and really beginning my journey. And the idea was like, you could take everything away from the top, I don't know, 2 to 5%. Maybe it was all the way up to 10, and they would reacquire it in the next 10 years, right? Because it's not the stuff They had that made the difference. It was their ability to acquire their understanding of the world, not looking at life through a scarcity mindset, but an abundance mindset, positioning themselves to build and grow. That's something that cannot be taken away. This is all a message that is hitting at the exact time I need to hear it. Right? Be bold. No, that's not bold. That's maintenance. That's doing what you've always done, plus maybe a little extra here. Or they're right. Truly living is about uncapping yourself in totality, really reaching, because you know that it's not the entity that holds the value. It's the one or ones who brought it to life. It's crazy to me that even when you were aware of fear, when you understand our proclivity to play scared, right? You get it. It's something we need to look out for. Even then, do we still find in our own lives places where we're limiting ourselves as if the fear just hides in the shadows, right? Controlling the subconscious from a distance like a puppet. Master strength growth evolution is the ability to find that fear and dismantle it. As was said to me a few years ago, most actions are reversible, right? Meaning you can make a mistake and it can be reversed. It can almost always be fixed, or at least reapo from a more intelligent angle. But what certainly cannot be fixed or changed or adjusted are roads never walked, adventures never begun. And with a scarcity mindset, you spend your entire life in your corner, protecting the little fragments of life you've collected along the way, right? That's it. But if you can flip that, if you can find a way to see the abundance, the value, the infinite opportunity, you realize it's not in those little fragments you collected, but the understanding that you can always collect more, and not only that builds something beautiful with them, not only acquire more, but use them to create a new reality, bend and shape. The word normal, like it's clay, like the world around you, is not giving orders, but taking them you hold. The value, not what you've made. You're right, we've all heard, give a boy a fish, feed him for a day, teach him to fish, feed him for life. I'm going to give it my all, make it my priority to remember every step along the way that it's in my ability to fish. That value exists if I'm not able to catch anything on a particular day. Life moves on, and so do I. If what I've caught goes bad or expires, life moves on, and so do I. It's in the action, it's in the doing. That's not only why you can take the risk and shoot for the moon, it's why you music must. I recently started the book Managing Oneself by Peter Drucker, and there's a pretty powerful point he makes in here early on that I want to share. Admittedly, an idea that I came to had later than I wish I did, but the second I did, a lot changed for me, and it changed pretty quickly. Essentially, it tells the reader stop wasting time on areas of low competency, right? The things that they don't really have a natural proclivity towards. And at first you might see this and think, wait a minute, haven't we always been taught to improve the things we struggle in? Isn't that the name of the game? Well, not necessarily. And in fact, a lot of us are held back trying to become moderately competent in areas we have no business being. When if we just took the things we love, the things we were naturally drawn towards, we could truly be impactful in those areas, leaders in those areas. That's where you change your life and ultimately the lives of those around you. In my world, I like using MAP as an example because it demonstrates this pretty well. My second year of calculus, I realized absolutely not. I do not like this. For me, it felt like a square peg in a round hole. I just didn't see a life where calculus would be a necessity, and so I dropped the course and sought out something that felt like a better fit. Now looking back, could one see my decision to walk away from that class is quitting? Sure meets the definition, but what happened? Well, I filled that slot, and what would have been many slots if I continued that path with courses that ultimately impacted my life for the better, that built a foundation for what I do today. They were aligned right. I got to express myself creatively, to write to speak 'em. I wrote papers about difficult topics. If I spent my entire life trying to become competent and calculus, it would have been a different story. Right? Could I have improved? No question. Like with time, it might have even gotten really Good, but would I have enjoyed it? No, that's not where my skill set is best. Utilized, that's not what I was born to do, and because of this, my ceiling would have most definitely been lower than. Someone who is naturally drawn towards calculus and loved. Calculus, you know, when you find what you love and it adds value there are. Fireworks, right? You become a force to be reckoned with. And I get asked every so often, whether it be on a podcast or Q&A, whatever the occasion, what are your thoughts or suggestions are around? Someone who finds themselves unmotivated in my first thought right. The first thing I'd always want to rule out is that perhaps that person has slipped into the wrong arena right. Trying to win a game that isn't theirs, you know how hard it would have been for me to be motivated every day if I woke up knowing calculus was what was on the docket, how would I have? Incentivize myself, there would have been a very clear layer of resistance, which is why at a director's point it's silly to allocate substantial time and resources and energy to endeavors that don't lift you up that you don't care about. Now, I'm not saying you only do things that you're amazing at. That doesn't make any sense either, as my friend Evan says, if you love doing it, but you're not that good at it, or it doesn't add value to anyone else that's great. You don't need a reason. You don't need to be excellent at everything, but what you have there is a hobby, okay? I'm talking about people in the midst of trying to expand their careers or build businesses, gain expertise, for practical reasons, navigate something of significance in those scenarios. That's where it's critical to stop trying to make all your 3s 5s and instead focus on making your 8s 10s. That's where again you will have that monumental impact. No one's ever celebrated for the things they were decent at, even if it took you 10 years to become decent, 20 years to become decent. No, it's the things you do well. Right? And if you look at the world that way and your pursuit that way, you'll live a happier life and a more productive, successful life. Now, there's so much power in the freedom you have to chart your course, but the first step is understanding you have that freedom and flexibility. It's understanding that when things don't feel right or feel a bit off, it's that it may not be you, it may be the path you've taken, the decisions you've made. Take some time to find a journey that aligns with who you are, and the world will give back outcomes that were previously unimaginable. Let go of what she'll never be good at, right? Who cares? There's too much upside to be at chasing down the things that will actually light you up, that will actually set you apart, the things that will create meaning in your life. There's an old idea that once you've started, you're halfway there. How does that make sense? One might wonder, once you started, you've only just begun, and that's true technically. But here's the thing, the journey, the ins and outs, ups and downs, trials and tribulations, they can all be dealt with. They knock us down from time to time, no doubt. But we learn, we adjust, and carry on as we move forward. Most success stories, they're crushed, rush not because of that adversity along the way, but because they never begin, they never take shape or materialize. We can't make them real. In our heads, we can't convince ourselves that they'll ever be anything other than fiction. We think that's for someone else. We look around and assume that reality is different than my reality. And overcoming this mental music constraint is always the most challenging step, and that's saying the one I continuously find myself coming back to. Human beings always follow through on who they believe themselves to be continues to be true. If you don't believe you're worthy of something, its pursuit is lost before it began. So while the mind tries to paint pictures of how scary that road is ahead, how it's too different or big or complex, understand that should you move forward, you'll find all that complexity can be broken down one day, one situation, one little step at a time. The only real demon here is the possibility of inaction, because you couldn't make yourself believe it. You couldn't see yourself at the top of that mountain, and so the front door was never opened. Emerson says, hitch your wagon to a star, a beautiful reminder that that star is proof your dreams are real, and only as real as the conviction with which you Move towards green light, your own glory, your own. Contentment, because contrary to what we might think, no one comes up and bestows. That upon us to live life fully is a decision, Latin root words, cut off. It's removing and abandoning your restraint in order to be more authentically you, in order that you'll give yourself permission to chase down that which makes you feel alive and soak up all that aligns with your heart. And so once you start, you're halfway there, and know that first step, often perceived as a beginning, but in actuality, a point few ever give themselves the luxury of. Experiencing step 1, believe it's possible. Step 2, believe you're worthy. Step 3, go. Everything else works itself out. You're capable of dancing through life's chaos of managing the world's unknowns. So know that, understand that. But most importantly, be one of the few who gives themselves permission to experience that, and it starts now. What exactly are you afraid of? What's holding you back as the giant rock you inhabit spins through the universe, a speck in a galaxy of stars? It's easy to look out and see the vastness of the world around you and forget entirely about the strength that you possess. Forget entirely that the mind's capacity is as infinite as those same stars that surround you. I don't think it's that we definitively choose to sell ourselves short. I think we simply lose sight of the fact that we have a say in the matter. To begin with, our fears keep us wishing, our insecurities keep us hoping, we stay standing still when we should be moving forward. But truth be told, our pain comes from not doing but wishing that we did. It's no coincidence that the more we fail, the more we realize life is a game that expands as we push. The power of making mistakes isn't the mistake itself, it's that when we get back up and brush ourselves off, our cognitive mapping of the world changes. We see that we can step out a little further. Our very definition of what's possible expands, and I believe that's what courage is: the willingness to step into that chaos of life, knowing that each time you find the strength to push forward, you are restructuring your reality. The resources are there, the tools are there, the opportunity is there. How crazy is the fact that we just need to convince ourselves that more is worth it, that the difficulty of short-term vulnerability isn't an enemy, it's the very ticket required for admission to the show. And so I ask again, what are you afraid of falling? Because you will rise, and you will rise stronger than you ever were. Is it criticism? Because people are so focused on their own endeavors that they look up way less than we think they do. And two, other than the small group you surround yourself with. Why would you care? Is it pride? Because building things of significance requires starting on the ground floor, and there's no shame. But significance requires starting on the ground floor, and there's no shame.